The final week of the Prismatic Draft League regular season. Our Halifax Masquerainmen should already be good to make the playoffs due to a certain thing that was clarified last week that I probably will have talked about in the most recent PDL video. Basically, I was wrong about how many teams will make the playoffs, but even so, you want to end the regular season on a high note, right? Finish over 500 and build some momentum heading into that very difficult playoff bracket. Okay, editing Slowpoke, redoing the standings update because it wasn't completely accurate the first time. Oops. Things got a little bit jumbled, no big deal. But yeah, so these are the standings after week 7 going into week 8. The Halifax Masquerainmen are tied for, 6th place. Fortunately, that does not determine our playoff standing as I mentioned last time, I was mistaken when I said all those times that 6 teams will make the playoffs. In fact, 8 teams will make the playoffs this season. So this tie with the Drowsy Torkoals for 6th place might affect seeding, but it will not affect whether we get in at all. Most likely the top 8 teams that you see here are the 8 that will make the playoffs. It looks like it is mathematically possible for the Chadots to tie the Reshiram still, and I don't know what happens then. As I've said before, I have this table that I made myself, sorted by win-loss record and then by game differential. And if there is another tiebreaker in this league after game differential, I don't know what it is. I just use alphabetical order for my own table, which is why the Masquerainmen are under the Torkoals here. So if the Chadots win 2-0 this week and the Reshirams lose 2-0, then they're both 3 and 4 with -1 game differential. And I do not know what happens then in that battle for the last playoff spot. But that is, at this point, the only way that the playoff field can be shaken up. At the very least, these top 7 teams are definitely in it. The Peaceful Porygons still in first place. And then we have 3 teams at 5 and 2, and 3 teams, including our Halifax Masquerainmen, at 4 and 3. So the playoff spot is clinched. It's possible that I'll say later in this video that I'm not sure about that, but as I come back and redo this later, I definitely am sure about it. We have made the playoffs, but still want to finish the season strong, finish with some momentum, and get the best seeding that we can, right? As there still is a fair bit of room for movement with so many teams clumped so close together. That's all. Back to the previous recording. But for the Halifax Masquerainmen, the main thing to keep an eye on is our matchup this week against the Alberta Arcanine. Here's that matchup. The Arcanine have Smeargle, Ninetales, Cantonian form, Hatterene, Porygon Z, Lapras, Chansey, Alomomola, Ceruledge, Alolan Golem, Volbeat, and Primeape. Some of that list is a bit of a mouthful, huh? So it's a team with a lot of scary pieces, but I mean, I think that, I think there have been a couple of issues for this team throughout the season, and one is a little bit of a lack of cohesion. Like, Ceruledge is a very strong setup Pokemon. I don't know that it necessarily has the right supports around it on this team. I think you could pair it with Chansey for an interesting bulky mode, but even then, there are going to be a lot of ways that strong offensive cores can break through it, right? Volbeat made a lot of sense as a Tailwind setter for Hisuian Typhlosion. They don't have that anymore. So the Tailwind setter in Volbeat and the Sun setter in Ninetales have a little bit less to work with. Ceruledge is a fine partner for them. Porygon Z still hits extremely hard and benefits a lot from Tailwind, so there are still some synergies that they can tie together, but it is definitely a team that's somewhat vulnerable to just being broken through. Primeape is an interesting Pokemon, maybe with an Eviolite and like Rage Fist, but it's noticeably not as strong as Annihilate. Alolan Golem can maybe blow up on stuff with Galvanized Boosted Explosion. Hatterene can set Trick Room and hit very hard. But for each of those individual strong things that I'm looking at in isolation, I'm not necessarily sure what supports they have to pair with to really put them over the top. The other thing that I think has been this team's issue throughout the season is I keep talking about a lack of coherent supports. Of course, Smeargle is kind of a magic band-aid for all of that. You can turn Smeargle into a support for just about anything because it has by far the widest move pool in the game, and yeah, just all kinds of support techs that can enable all kinds of modes from its teammates. So pairing Smeargle with very hard-hitting teammates like Porygon Z, Ceruledge, and Hatterene looks very strong, but this coach has And I mean, I talk about this like it's a problem for the team, right? But this is clearly a choice that they've made, an experiment that they want to try, and it'll be very cool. You know, it's very cool in the timeline where it works out somewhat better. But this coach has been doubling, tripling, quadrupling, probably octupling down this week on running offensive Smeargle, usually with moves like Population Bomb and Boom Burst. It's a very cool idea. You'd love to see it work. Not this week. I don't want to see it work this week, but another week I'd love to. But of course, Smeargle doesn't have a whole lot in terms of stats, and given that it's the strongest support Pokemon on this team, there aren't always a ton of supports for it, so that mode has tended not to work very well. But, I mean, I'm always, except this week, kind of rooting for them to pull it off, because it's a very fun idea. I also haven't talked about the Lapras, but we've seen the Lapras click Sheer Cold a lot of times in this season, and not hit very many of them, so who knows, maybe it's due. But for my part, like I said, given that this team looks like one that can be smashed through by strong opposition, and given that I don't want to allow longer-term setup to Pokemon like Ceruledge, Primeape, even, and even some of those offensive Smeargle sets that can be very strong if they're given multiple turns to get going, or just Lapras clicking Sheer Cold over and over. I have played a more sort of straightforward offensive game plan this week, sort of gone back to the basic familiar way of using this team, which I think is the strongest approach to take this week, and it does start, as it so often does, with kommo-o. Running the oh-so-familiar Clangorous Soul Throat Spray set, but again, I think that boosted Clanging Scales, especially when the opponent's team has no Dragon Resist or immunity except Hatterene, and Hatterene, of course, brings its own issues because it's very slow. It's vulnerable to a certain other Pokemon that's coming up here. You kind of need to build your team around Hatterene. We'll see whether they do that or not, but otherwise they have nothing that wants to take a Clanging Scales. kommo-o, I think, has a lot of potential to just rip through this team. The other thing that I neglected to mention a second ago about the Arcanine roster is that even though it's not a dedicated Trick Room team, the Hatterene is the main Trick Room piece, like I said, it is not a very fast team. Ninetales is the fastest Pokemon that they have at base 100 speed, and then it's all mid to low speed from there pretty much. So kommo-o is able to comfortably run a modest nature and not even very much speed investment. So it's fairly heavily invested in bulk, and with those 52 speed EVs alone, it should always be faster than Ninetales unless it's holding a Choice Scarf or something after a boost. So a lot of our Pokemon this week are freed up to run those harder hitting bulkier sets because there isn't the same need to invest in speed. So kommo-o should be very well positioned if it gets that Clangorous Soul off, and then yeah, Clanging Scales pretty much covers everything except a random Steel or Fairy Terra or the Hatterene, and for the Fairy Terra or Hatterene, we have Flash Cannon to pick that up. Very straightforward, nothing you haven't seen before. A Terra type of Steel so that kommo-o can take a Dazzling Gleam or something if it needs to, and also to power up the Flash Cannon. I actually considered Terra Stellar this week, so I would not only have a stronger Flash Cannon into Hatterene, but also a one-time boost to the Clanging Scales. I think that could have been a lot of fun, but Steel just feels a little bit more solid here. Maybe I'll change my mind before the battle, but probably not. And once again, something I'm noticing about running kommo-o in this draft league a lot is that even though kommo-o has 3 abilities in Bulletproof, Overcoat, and Soundproof that are all very good on paper, in a draft league format where all of those abilities counter fairly specific things, and obviously your opponent's options into your team are limited by their draft, I have found there are a lot of weeks, I feel like I've said very often in these team builder segments, that there was no particular kommo-o ability that seemed especially strong in a given week. That's largely the case here as well. The reason that I'm running Soundproof is because the Arcanines like to run Boom Burst Smeargle sometimes, so that's at least something to be immune to here. Up next, like I said, kommo-o always has to watch out for a random Fairy Terra on something, and we have just the Pokemon to cover that in Assault Vest Tinkaton. Tinkaton running the Terra Water, so it will resist not only fire attacks from Ceruledge and Ninetales, but also water attacks from Lapras and even Alomomola if they want to attack with that, as well as ice attacks from Lapras other than Freeze Dry. Water seeming like a fairly solid defensive type for a starting point like Steel Fairy in this matchup. But yeah, Tinkaton just Not worried about running speed on it, just loading it up with attack, with an adamant nature, loading it up with some bulk. The assault vest should help it take hits. Generally, other than like the Alolan Golem, generally their strongest, and the Ceruledge, but a lot of their strongest Pokemon hit on the special side of the spectrum. Porygon Z is able to hit extremely hard. So is... Well, that's the main one, but Hatterene can also hit fairly hard, and even Ninetales if it gets Sunset up. So I considered like an Occa Berry this week, but I think Assault Vest Tinkaton is just fine here to make it tankier into those. Fake Out, of course, gives kommo-o some cover to set up, potentially, or to attack. Gigaton Hammer helps to clean up those fairy types that could give kommo-o trouble. And then the last two moves I'm honestly a little bit iffy on. Knock Off, like I said, I don't want to let the opponent... Well, first of all, I need a bit of coverage in this matchup, right? I could run Play Rough to help me hit Pokemon like Alomomola and Lapras. That is something that I still haven't fully ruled out, but it doesn't really... It's not really that of any help into the two strong fire types that they have, including one of their main setup offensive engines in Ceruledge. Knockoff, I like not only for the super effective damage into Ceruledge, which is probably still not that great with Tinkaton's attack stat, but because it can get rid of something like a Leftovers or a Citrus Berry, make it a little bit harder for a Pokemon like not only Ceruledge, but also Lapras or Alomomola or even Eviolite Chansey to sit on the field for a long time and sponge attacks. And then I have Water Terra Blast for that little bit more coverage into fire types like Ceruledge and Ninetales if I really want it, although I don't know how likely it is necessarily that I'll Terrasilize Tinkaton. I don't really have strong feelings about my Terra in this matchup at all, but certainly the option is there if I want to use it. But, of course, Tinkaton's two main moves to benefit kommo-o are Fake Out and Gigaton Hammer, and both of them are represented here. Finally, I realized actually as I was making this image that I hadn't thought at all about Tinkaton's ability, and I might as well have just gone ahead with that, because Tinkaton, even more than kommo-o, just doesn't have an ability that seems useful to me this week, even though it has multiple good abilities. I've gone with Own Tempo just on the off chance that there's like a Confuse Ray Ninetales or something. I think it gets Confuse Ray, maybe it doesn't. I couldn't think of any significant use case for Mold Breaker this week. And Tinkaton's other ability is Pickpocket, which for a second had me thinking about going back to the Occa Berry, but it's not really useful with an Assault Vest unless they knock that off, and I don't think there's much chance that that's going to happen. So, doing my absolute best to grasp at straws for any reason to use any particular ability, Own Tempo seemed like the most plausible by the tiniest margin. And so here it is. Up next, another very familiar support for kommo-o. We have the Follow Me Magmortar. This Pokemon has a Citrus Berry, a bunch of Special Bulk, and the Water Terra type to help deal with Lapras and Alomomola if I want. I could consider Grass to help with Alolan Golem, but that then is weak to Lapras. So I think keeping Water is... I could run Freeze Dry on Lapras. Maybe I should think about Grass, actually. I'll keep Water for now, but I'll let you know if I change my mind by the time the battle starts. Anyway, I've loaded it up on Special Bulk. I was thinking about doing, calculating a mixed bulk spread for Magmortar, but then I ran some calcs against Porygon Z, and depending on what kind of set they run, it still might one-shot this Magmortar, but just loading up on Special Bulk like this gives Magmortar a chance to take a hit against some powerful Porygon Z sets, and given that's their hardest hitting Pokemon, and Magmortar naturally resists Bitter Blade from Ceruledge, which, come to think of it, might be a decent reason to keep the Terra Water. The special bulky approach seems fine here. And then the Citrus Berry can maybe help it survive yet a little bit longer. Its job is probably mostly just to click Follow Me. I could maybe lead it with kommo-o and just click Clangorous Soul, Follow Me, let Magmortar sit there and be annoying for as long as it can. I do have Flamethrower and Scorching Sands for some options to hit the opposing Pokemon. Scorching Sands, of course, being super effective into Ninetales and Ceruledge, and neutral into Alomomola. Also, double super effective into Alolan Golem, which I wasn't even really thinking about, but that is nice to have. It does complement Flamethrower's coverage very nicely in this matchup. And that's pretty much it. The other thing is, I guess, there's not much reason to run Vital Spirit in this matchup that I can see, but I actually do specifically like Flame Body here, because if we redirect a Population Bomb from Smeargle, we probably get the burn somewhere in those hits. So that's nice to have. I almost hope that we actually see that happen during the set. That said, I've talked about doing damage and trying to break through, but I've only really shown one offensive Pokemon in kommo-o, and then Tinkaton is kind of offensive support, but It and Magmortar are mostly here for support roles, so you might be wondering where the rest of the damage is coming from, and that starts with the next Pokemon, Azumarill. I have talked all season about wanting to run a choice banned Azumarill, and this week feels like the week for it. I don't think I need to waste time setting up a belly drum this week and playing passively to make that work, and potentially opening up setup for my opponent or something, some strong attack coming out from a Hatterene or something. I think that in this matchup against these opposing Pokemon, Azumarill can be here to just try to snipe KOs with Aqua Jet. And obviously that's not going to work very well against a Pokemon like Lapras or Alomomola. I do have the option to click Play Rough. I also have Liquidation, so that if Azumarill is faster than a target, and you can see I'm not running very much speed investment, but there may be situations where it's faster than a target. I do have that stronger hit, and I have superpower for the super effective coverage into Lapras in a pinch, in case I really need to deny a Freeze Dry or a Sheer Cold or something. But my main vision for this Azumarill set, Aqua Jet the Smeargle, Aqua Jet the Volbeat, Aqua Jet the Cerulege, Aqua Jet the Ninetales, whatever it might be. I have Terra Water this time, not for defensive purposes, but for offensive purposes. No need to set up a belly drum, just get in there and hit things hard with priority. And then I have one other just get in there and hit things hard Pokemon after that, and it is a Choice Scarf Terra Rock Salamence. That's actually not the only thing that Salamence is here for. I do like Intimidate in this matchup because it can slow Cerulege down if that tries to get going. It can maybe nerf Alolan Golem in some weird position. And it definitely weakens a Population Bomb Smeargle. But yeah, the main thing for Salamence, with the Choice Scarf, I don't need to worry about speed investment. I don't have any. And it should still go before anything in a neutral speed control situation, you know, all else being equal. And then just clicking Rock Slide should be very strong into my opponent's team. Some of their key Pokemon, like Cerulege, Ninetales, Lapras, and Volbeat, all have a shared weakness to Rock, and then Smeargle just doesn't have a lot of defense, so it should be hit hard by this too. So yeah, that's my main vision. I don't know, I kind of feel like the most likely mode for game 1 at least is the first 4 Pokemon, Kommo-o, Tinkaton, Magmortar, Azumarill, probably, depending on what we see at preview, right? I don't necessarily know how likely Salamence is to come to a given game, but that's basically what Salamence is here to do. Just click Rock Slide, or if there's no Hatterene to worry about, maybe just click Outrage, and probably KO some stuff with the drawback that I can't choose the target. And that's it. Just go crazy with that, right? Dual Wing Beat I threw in there mostly for coverage into Hatterene, so I thought about changing it to just like Iron Head. I think Salamence gets Iron Head. Maybe I'll do that, but I guess the stab that's neutral into a lot of things is potentially a little better when you're running a choice set and you're locking yourself into whatever the move is. You can't really look at a target in isolation in that way, so keeping Dual Wing Beat is probably fine. And then Crunch is specifically to get a lot of damage quickly into Cerulege if for some reason I'm in a situation where I don't want to lock into Rock Slide, although I'm not necessarily sure what that would be in this matchup. But this is a choice set, so you know, there's not really any use filling that slot with Protect or anything, and Salamence's main job is to click Rock Slide. And you might be thinking, well, I could run Tailwind. Scarf Tailwind is a little awkward, but it's not the craziest thing. But that's where I tell you that this being the last week of the regular season, I wanted to make an effort to bring at least one Pokemon that has not been brought to a set before. We do have 2 such Pokemon on our roster that we've not been, neither I nor Spooky have been bringing all season. I even thought about trying to fit both of them onto this team. In fact, I had Salamence cut for a little bit. But like I said, I do want to take this seriously and really try to get that win. So in the end, I only made room for one Pokemon. It's not Misdreavus. Unfortunately, Misdreavus will not be appearing this regular season at all. Maybe in playoffs, we'll see. But I have found room this week for Yanma. Yanma running, again, because of the speed situation in this matchup, I honestly considered not running Speed Boost, but I think it's worthwhile because my opponent does have their own possible Tailwind with the Volbeat. A lot of what I've said about their team not being very, very fast only really applies if the Volbeat has not set Tailwind for them. And so, or the Smeargle could set Tailwind, that would be funny. And so I have brought my own Tailwind to cover for, you know, if I see the Volbeat at preview and maybe they play it aggressively game 1 or something, I at least have this option. Yeah, but Yanma's not running any speed investment. 1 speed boost after a detect should usually be fine, except maybe in that speed or in that Tailwind situation. I have the Terra Ghost just to cover in case there's a fake out Smeargle or like an extreme speed Smeargle, so they can't snipe Yanma with something like that if I terrestrialize it. And then it's very straightforward: Tailwind, Wide Lens, and Hypnosis to disrupt their team, create openings for Pokemon like kommo-o, Azumarill, and Salamence to hit hard without being hit back. I'm not sure exactly how accurate Hypnosis is with the Wide Lens. It's definitely not 100, but you know, hopefully we'll land them if we get into a position where we're using them at all. And then just Air Slash so that Yanma is able to attack. Pretty simple stuff this week. We try to set up kommo-o. That's probably the early game plan in game 1. Although, again, I will adjust if there's something I see at preview that makes me think differently. We support it with redirection from Magmortar, Fake Out, and Gigaton Hammer from Tinkaton. We have Azumarill or Salamence in a cleaner role. Yeah, a cleaner role to clean up at the end of the game. That is what that means. And then we can mix and match them in game 2 and a possible game 3 as needed. And Yanma is a wild card that I can throw in if there really is a Tailwind matching game to be played here. I might actually want to consider a Focus Sash, but no, I want to land Hypnosis. If they knock out Yanma before it gets Tailwind off, so be it. I don't think Yanma is that important to the strategy this week. But yeah, that's the team, and all that's left is to jump into the battles and see what happens, right? Okay, regular season finale. For anyone tracking the timeline, I actually just finished making last week's PDL watching video, I don't know, minutes ago, and now I'm playing week 8. Alright. It's the Raymer King here in the Alberta Arcanine. It also took us a little bit of time to get started because apparently one of my nicknames was illegal. Yanma doesn't have the nickname that I originally intended, but here we are anyway. Okay. Smeargle, Chansey, Lapras, Volbeat, Ceruledge, Hatterene. That makes sense, right? When kommo-o is my S-tier Pokemon, and I've been running Throat Spray stuff a lot, that they would bring Chansey and Hatterene. Unfortunately for me, I have brought the Throat Spray stuff this week, too. It may still be worthwhile to just go for the Clangorous Soul with, like, a Tinkaton lead next to it. I think that makes sense. That can threaten either one of these Pokemon. If they lead both, then it's a little bit dicier. Or even if they lead Ceruledge, I mean, that can threaten Tinkaton, but maybe I should have run the Aqua Berry. I could terrestrialize Tinkaton. There's opportunity cost, but it might be worth. I'm going to try that game 1 at least. kommo-o, Tinkaton. I think I do like a Azumarill here. Aqua Jet's pretty strong into most of this. And I could do Lapras, by which I mean Salamence. I'm not especially feeling Magmortar against these Pokemon. Might as well try Salamence. If they get Trick Room up, that could actually get dicey, but okay, it's Smeargle, Hatterene lead. That means I don't have to terrestrialize Tinkaton, and I actually am free to terrestrialize kommo-o if I want, which I think I might want to do because they could do something with Hatterene to take the Gigaton Hammer, right? I do think I'm just going to Gigaton Hammer Hatterene turn 1, but there are a lot of things they could do about that. They could fake out Tinkaton if they're finally running that move on Smeargle. They could protect, and then I can't use Gigaton Hammer next turn. They could terrestrialize Hatterene. So let's do this. But I will still just target the Gigaton Hammer into Hatterene, and let's see what happens. I mean, like I said, I'm playing it fairly straightforwardly to start off this week, but at least we'll get some information about their game plan, even if this doesn't work out right now. And I have 2 very strong Pokemon in the back, so even if they stop kommo-o, the game isn't over. Okay. Lock on. Do they have a one-hit KO move on the Smeargle? They do just let me pick up the Hatterene there, so that's good. Is it like Sheer Cold Smeargle? That's so cool if it is. And it got the special defense boost from Moody? Oh my god. I can protect around it, right? Knock off. Lock on won't stop that, I think. Let's find out. But that's very cool. And let's just knock it off in case it has like a Focus Sash. It is Sheer Cold Smeargle. That's so funny. Flame Charge Ceruledge, oh my god. Good thing I have Aqua Jet in the back. Okay, it's Covert Cloak Smeargle, so I can't flinch it with Fake Out, good to know. Smeargle really doesn't have very many stats, but... And it was at -1 defense, but I I think that knockoff crit might well have mattered. It's Volbeat last. I'm just going to click Clanging Scales, and honestly, let's just click Gigaton Hammer into the Rizzler here. The Flame Charge Ceruledge is really cool, actually. I mean, I counted a lot in my planning for this not being an especially fast team. And now it's at plus... They encored kommo-o. Now it's at +2 speed. Okay. But I can... I don't know which Pokemon I want to bring in. I can Intimidate Ceruledge here. Yep, no Clear Amulet. I can't Terrastalize Salamence, of course, but I can still Rock Slide. Or I can just Crunch, but I think Rock Slide is fine. And then I still have a Azumarill in the back, so even if I just get some damage with the Rock Slide here... Ooh, Terra Fairy Ceruledge, okay. Even if I just get some damage with the Rock Slide, I can start trying to pick things off with Aqua Jet. Rock Slide misses the Volbeat. That's actually the target I would have preferred to hit. As it is still possible for the Ceruledge to run away with this game, especially with kommo-o under the Encore pressure. I'll let Salamence go down here so I can get a Azumarill in safely. Yeah, the Ceruledge in the back with the Encore Volbeat is actually looking like a very serious threat here. They paralyze kommo-o. They're still not attacking it. Of course, they can Encore it again now. But yeah, I'll get my Frog in here. -1 attack Ceruledge. It might be worthwhile to lock into Liquidation. I need a Azumarill to be able to take a hit for that to pay off. But then what's the difference between that and 2 Aqua Jets? We'll click Clanging Scales. They probably won't let me, but we'll try. Yeah, it's just a tiny bit stronger. I don't think it really... I think locking into Aqua Jet is okay. That almost KOs. Not quite. Poltergeist doesn't do too much. kommo-o is paralyzed. That's unfortunate, because I would have gotten the Clanging Scales off there. Actually, I should be clicking Flash Cannon anyway. I would have gotten the Flash Cannon off there. But the Volbeat tried to get me with Counter, but I attacked the Ceruledge instead. It can Protect if it has it. The Thunder Wave. Azumarill, I can lose to a full para. They do get the full para. They also get Bitter Blade Recovery, but that's not enough to survive an Aqua Jet. And in any case, the Flash Cannon goes off this time and takes it out. And there's Clanging Scales and Aqua Jet into the Rizzler. Volpera. They counter Azumarill. Oh my god. Do I lose this? What else does... No, we've seen all its moves. Counter is its only attack. So, Clanging Scales is perfectly safe. Alright. That did get a little dicey, though. So... Oh my god. This team is so funny. Okay. What do I want to do in game 2? Honestly, I don't hate running back the same mode again, but I also wouldn't mind mixing the Yanma in this time. I think that could be fun. The problem is, I can't lead, like, kommo-o Yanma, because Magic Bounce Hatterene just shuts that down. I could lead Salamence this time. With, like, Tinkaton. And then Azumarill and Yanma in the back. But maybe I need the kommo-o for insurance. You know, it being able to sit on the field for a long time really came through in that endgame there. Although that had a lot to do with them just not attacking it while they had it Encore locked. I think I'm down to try Salamence, Tinkaton, Azumarill, Yanma. Might as well give it a go. They're leading Volbeat and Ceruledge this time, so getting the Intimidate immediately is nice. We know that the Covert Cloak isn't on the Volbeat, so I can just Terra Rock, Rock Slide, Fake Out Volbeat. Right? They can Terra Fairy the Ceruledge again if they want. Maybe it's actually better... I don't want to take a Thunder Wave. What I'm saying is maybe it's actually better to just Gigaton Hammer the Ceruledge turn 1. I'm down to do that. Let's see. Okay, they actually switch it out to Lapras. That's a great nickname for the way they've played Lapras this season. The Rock Slide almost KOs Volbeat. If I just faked out Volbeat. Oh well. But I do get the KO on Lapras here. Oh, say hi back to the Raymer King. I missed this until now, but, you know, don't be rude. Of course, now I can pivot Tinkaton out if I want and still have the fake out pressure on the Volbeat. Smeargle's back. I think I'm down to just Rock Slide and see what happens. And honestly, it'll just go knock off into Smeargle. Thunderwave, Tinkaton, okay. They're running Spore on the Smeargle this week. So it's not the offensive Smeargle that I've come to expect. That's a good switch up there. Alright, well, just Rock Slide, and I think I'm down to try to finish off the Rizzler if I can. Be nice to not let them get a second Tailwind in this game. They still have the Cerulege in the back, and we know that can be a pretty serious win con for them. But I still have a Zoom Roll, at least. And also, the Cerulege has shown Flame Charge, Poltergeist. Did it use Bitter Blade? I think it did. Okay, 2 KOs with Rock Slide there. Did the Cerulege use Bitter Blade? Yeah. So we know it doesn't have Shadow Sneak. So Yanma should be able to win the speed control game against Cerulege and threaten it with Hypnosis. Here we'll just Rock Slide and knock off. Not let it get comfortable. There's the Terra Fairy. I guess I could have clicked Gigaton Hammer like I did turn 1, but it doesn't matter. Tinkaton just drops to that Bitter Blade. But now the Tailwind ends. Salamence still has his Choice Scarf intact. This doesn't have priority, so it should just drop to a Rock Slide, but I'll give Yanma a chance to get it to hit the field at least. And just Detect for a speed boost. And then if Cerulege gets through this turn somehow, I can click Hypnosis. But no, the Terra Rock Choice Scarf Salamence does come through here in Game 2. And that is the Halifax Masquerainmen regular season. GG's to the Raymer King. This was a fun one for sure. I've really enjoyed all the creative ways that you've used your team throughout the season. It's been a pleasure to watch all throughout. Glad you joined the league. Hope you stick around after this season. But yeah, 5-3, the Halifax Masquerainmen will definitely be making playoffs. It's safe to say. I don't know who the opponent's going to be yet. There's still a lot of room for movement in the standings, but we'll find out later this week, and then it'll be time to look ahead to the quarterfinals. It's going to be interesting for sure. But yeah, that was a fun regular season, and playoffs next week. After, of course, the PDL watching video for Week 8 on Friday.